What's up, folks? I'm JC Owens. This is Rock My World, episode 30. Can't believe we made it that far. Club 27 and the power of death. Now, most of you are aware of what the 27 Club is, but for those of you who aren't, it is a getting to be fairly long list of young musicians who, at the age of 27, met their end rather tragically, and it's become a cultural phenomenon, if you will. Now, of course, the mainstream always says, oh, well, they're just young and they're famous and they have all this money and they're, living fast and it just got the better of them. Well, I would posit that that is not the case. Not only, do you not have this happening, with, more 20 and 27-year-olds than it does with anyone else. They don't die from this stuff any faster than anyone else does. But there's also all kinds of weirdness around the investigations around their deaths, around the witnesses' statements, and and more, right? And I would say that they were removed for being a problem. If you look into it, all of the artists on that list had become a problem for somebody, specifically the people who were responsible for distributing their music, their bands, and the money people, right? You look at Robert Johnson. There was tale that he was running around and sleeping with people's wives that he wasn't supposed to. You look at Kurt Cobain, he was getting burnt out, wanting to leave. You look at Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse. They all were getting burnt out and or wanting to leave and do something else. They were wanting to go against what their labels were wanting them to do, what their producers were wanting them to do. Now, those of you who have seen, recording contracts, as I have, you will know that there's usually something in there called the non-performance clause. This clause is designed, or, at least on its face, is designed to help the labels and the money people recoup their investment anytime an artist isn't going to perform. Hence, non-performance clause, right? This can be from they're dying, they're just walking away, etc. But obviously, if they're dead, then it is much more helpful than if they're just allowed to walk away. Why is that? Well, you have something that's called the death effect. There's power in death, folks. There's energy in every living thing, and when it dies, there's a release of energy, and this manifests in many different ways. When an artist dies, it's fairly well known that anytime an artist dies, the value of their work goes through the roof. We've talked about value before, its roots. It comes down to rarity and scarcity. If everybody was super talented artists, it wouldn't be important anymore. The only reason art is important is because only a few people are gifted with the ability to make it, to express it, to come up with it off the top of their head, to connect with the muses, however you want to put it. If you're a pagan, you kind of are into that muse thing. I get it. I used to dabble in that myself, but don't anymore. But I digress. The fact of the matter is, the number 27 itself is not even just a number, right? We talked about the secret societies and mystery school doctrines that the elite subscribe to, that even the prominent members of your town are likely being taught, just as I was. My family, I'm descended of Sacagawea. I am also the grandson of the town sheriff. I was part of that town ruling class, if you will, and thus I was taught a lot of these things. And the number 27 in Kabbalah, in numerology, in number magic, if you will, is a very important number. It's the ultimate manifestation of spiritual power and cosmic harmony, as well as acting as a spiritual bridge between the physical and transcendence itself. Right? It's a super important number. It's not arbitrary at all. I believe it's picked for a very specific reason. Tying back to this capitalizing on your investment type idea and the fact that your investment is becoming problematic. Remember, the reason that they're pushing AI mainly in the field of music and things like that is because AI is easier to control. AI won't gain a conscience, get burnt out, or decide it doesn't want to do the job. It just does what it's told, right? Or at least they are assuming it will. And in number magic, you are working with a scale of 1 through 9 and 0, right? You have like 0 representing absolute nothing, so it doesn't count. And the numbers 1 through 9, anytime you have them together, like 27, you would take that, and that would then follow as 2 plus 7, which then gives you 9, which is divisible by 3. 3 is a representation of the black cube, the Trinity, and all these kinds of other things. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27, right? It also is, really important as far as like the lunar calendar goes, because the lunar calendar is 27.3 days between, it's waning and it's coming the new moon, right? So, like, these things run back into the ancient esoteric traditions for thousands and thousands of years, folks. For thousands and thousands of years, like, our ancient ancestors talked about the power of death and how you can use it to make things happen, to help, encourage the things you want to, to manifest, to become real. And if you go looking into the different artists and their deaths, like, not only did the record labels manage to make out like bandits financially, but for every one of them, they were thought leaders of movements, right? When Brian Jones, Janis, Jimmy, and Jim Morrison all died, it killed the flower power movement. It triggered the shift towards heavy metal, stadium rock, and the singer-songwriter movement of the mid-'70s. Right? You look into Kurt Cobain, that marked the death of grunge and the shift towards highly processed punk pop and commercial pop of the 90s. Amy Winehouse left a void for authentic retro-style R&B and soul, and this directly opened the floodgates for a wave of modern neo-soul and pop artists. Or pop soul artists, and I could go on. There's always been this cultural shift every time that one of these people die, right? Like, it's part of a mechanism. Part of a mechanism. They become problematic. You get rid of them and you use them to slingshot new acts and new types of music that you then can capitalize on again, right? It's an actual tactic that the ancients discussed in some of their their manuals, for kings and things like that. You see, the pyramid structure. You have the Brahmin up the top. The Brahmin are the priesthood that are producing these manuals, and then they're giving these manuals to kings and nobility so that they can understand how to rule over the public and how to use these esoteric principles, number magic, etc., to be able to manipulate events. See, when I say control and reference to the elites, at least up until the digital era and the amount of surveillance and control they have now, it's always been something more like nudging rather than outright control, right? Like, you can't just do stuff. You have to coerce the system and kind of nudge it that way. And, when put together with massive amounts of money and political power, etc., you can make all kinds of things happen. You can make all kinds of things happen. And I would argue that that's exactly what this little 27 Club thing is. They're using the esoteric power behind death and, fame and the idol. Why do they call famous people idols in the first place? That's a religious term. That's a religious term referring to an object of worship. An object of worship, folks. Like, this is not, you cannot separate what goes on in our world from spirituality. I know the atheists really want to be able to do that, and this comes out of that tradition that Sir Francis Bacon founded, like I've talked about before, but you can't. You can't. There's no way. This is why the ancients were so obsessed with spirituality and things. It's not just because they're obsessed with control or any of that. It's because, like, these kinds of things are not arbitrary. The elite understand that this stuff is, it's set into the very fabric of reality. That's really what the ancient mysteries are. They're encoded doctrines that teach about nature and the way the system that God built works. Like, that's what the basis of the mysteries are. That's how they are the foundation of modern chemistry and physics and technology. Like, these doctrines are at the foundation of it all. And when you have real world results coming out of it like that, of course the elite are going to follow it. It's getting them what they want. Like, why wouldn't they follow it? For tens of thousands of years, this is the philosophy of fire has allowed the elite to be the elite and the plebs to stay the plebs. Right? Like, this knowledge changes you. It changes the way you behave. It changes the way you move in the world. That's why people who are masters in these secret societies are called odd fellows, right? It makes you different than everyone else, and you can't go back. But I would argue, like, we all need to change. We all need to open our eyes and realize what is actually going on. If the public isn't made aware, then, like, we will stay stuck in this cycle forever. We'll never get out of it. And, the 27 Club is just another example of, elite manipulation and how they will just throw you away like garbage whenever they're done with you, or you become, too difficult to deal with, which is exactly what they're doing now with AI. They want to bring AI in, and, AI can mimic us all. They already have, they have my voice, my face right here. I die, they could easily make a digital copy of me and make me say anything they want. You're seeing it with Ozzy Osbourne and stuff now, like, and Kiss, they're already putting them on tour. Kiss aren't even dead yet, and they're already got digital avatars prepared to propagandize people on into the future forevermore. Now that they have digital, they really can watch you 24/7. They really can have almost total control over what you do. Like I said before, it was just mostly nudging things in the direction that they wanted. Now it's becoming much more a system of control. Anyway, we'll stop there for today, folks. Much love as always, and I'll talk to you later.